So you said you had a number in your head. What was that number?
$100 million.
Okay. Did you hit it? Welcome to the third episode of Committed to Greatness. I am your host, Corey Simpkins, and on today's episode, we will be exploring the real estate industry. Today's episode is brought to you by my favorite dentist, Sahara Dental Group. They have 2 beautiful locations serving the Las Vegas community. If you or your family require dental care, you can learn more about them and book your appointment with the link in the description. All right, on today's episode, we have Ali Kaveh. He is the founder and CEO of Platinum Realty, and we're going to be talking about the real estate market. How are you, Ali?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you for having me, Corey.
Awesome. Well, I guess we would start with, how'd you get your start in real estate?
So I got into it in 1996, right after graduating from high school here. And I was going to UNLV, getting my bachelor's in economics. And my dad was in the same business. And he had a friend who was also in the same business. So I would go with him, just to his office. And I saw how good he was doing back then. And I said, this is what I want to do.
Nice.
And of course, my dad was against it. He wanted me to be a dentist.
Okay.
So I got my real estate license back in 1996.
Nice.
And I started doing real estate.
As an agent?
As an agent.
Okay.
And then I got my broker's license in 1998. Usually you have to have 10 years of experience, but because I was getting my bachelor's in economics, I could use those credits to offset the years of experience. So I ended up getting my broker's license in 1998.
Awesome. Would you say that besides the use of the credits to get your broker's license earlier, would you say that having that economics degree kind of gave you a foot ahead of other people in the space, or it's just kind of, yeah?
Honestly, no, it didn't. I got my bachelor's just to have a bachelor.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had gotten my master's, but I never followed up with that. But not really, because what you learn in school and what's out there on the street, they're totally different.
Yeah.
So the short answer is no.
Yeah. Experience is the best teacher.
It is.
And at Platinum, what do you guys do? What is your expertise in that?
So basically, I'm a developer. So
Okay.
what I do is I buy a parcel of land. It's raw. There's nothing built around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I build shopping centers, housing tracts, or apartments.
Wow.
So that's pretty much what we do in just for development. And, it's about a 2-year process minimum to get the entitlements from the day you start. You have to go through zoning and get your engineering done and everything. So it's about a year and a half minimum to get your permits, realistically about 2 years. And then construction could be another 6 months to a year. But of course, these days, everything has changed with COVID because everything is taking longer. Everything is online now. So plan reviews, where it used to take a week for a plan examiner. It used to be that you go to the building department, submit your plans.
Mm-hmm.
You would actually talk to a person and they'll have their comments. And then you go back, make your corrections and submit it and pull your permit. Now everything is online.
Oh.
And it just takes 3 weeks for them to comment back. So a simple permit could take up to 3 months, which I think is really unfortunate and is not good for our economy here.
Definitely.
Because one of the things that attracts developers and investors to our city is the fact that we're business friendly, and we don't have so many regulations like other states like California. And the other issue we're having with construction now, obviously, again, because of COVID, we can't find labor. So everybody is so busy and they have other jobs that they're doing and just not enough out there. So those are the challenges that we have faced since COVID started.
Do you see things improving because COVID's kind of dying down now?
You know, I'm still shocked that people use COVID as an excuse. I just don't get it. People losing their job because of COVID. That just makes no sense to me. There is just so much demand for job out there. And if someone came to me and said, I lost my job because of COVID, it makes no sense.
That's the thing. Like, I know initially there was a huge impact on people and people did lose their jobs, but I feel like as we've recovered from it, so many things have opened up. And the way I kind of see the market, especially in Las Vegas, like everybody's hiring. I know every job isn't the kind of job that you want, but it does seem like everybody is looking for people.
Everybody's looking. I think with COVID, people learned not to work as much or get away with, things that before they never thought about doing. I don't think people are willing to work as much anymore. It just, I'll give you one example. The building department here, they just closed on Fridays because of COVID, and they have stayed closed on Fridays.
Yeah.
So that's one day less that we have to wait, or one day more that we have to get for our plans to be reviewed. And I think these things long term will hurt us. Maybe short term, people think they are getting away with things and things are easier, but I don't think it's good for our economy and for our city.
Yeah. And what can you share about the size of your portfolio at Platinum?
So basically, I've started by building office buildings and retails. That was my major line of development. I've done retail centers from as little as 5,000 square feet up to 100,000 square feet throughout the valley here. I've also done some tract home projects, and currently I'm doing some apartments.
Nice.
So mostly my portfolio, I would say, is in retail, but in the past 4 or 5 years, I've shifted to more residential.
Okay.
Because commercial is not what it used to be.
How so?
So commercial market has really shifted from being in commercial going to industrial. Obviously, everybody shops online now, or at least most people do.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too long ago that I remember to get a good piece of land here in Las Vegas for commercial, you would pay about $20, $25 a foot. And industrial land was about $5 a foot. Now, industrial land is more expensive than commercial. All the big box tenants, Target, Walmarts, all those guys, they're not really interested in opening up new stores because it costs more money. It's more expensive for them in terms of labor. They are now, they have shifted to having warehouses, distribution centers, because now they're online because everybody was keeping up with Amazon. So it used to be that building a shopping center with an anchor tenant, what we call an anchor tenant, like a Target, like a Walmart.
Someone who's going to be there for a while.
Right. But now retail has shifted into mostly services, meaning that you have smaller centers where you have a fast food, a gas station, or maybe a nail shop, a dry cleaners, things that cannot be done online.
Yeah.
So it has really changed. The commercial market has changed. It's still pretty good, still if you have a good location, but it's not what it used to be. It used to be that, building bigger and bigger retail centers was a good thing, but now it's the opposite. The bigger you build, the more tenants you have, less likely you may survive because they may close down and they're not as good of a tenant as they used to be. I remember like maybe 2004, 2005, if you had a center where you had a grocery store, like an Albertsons in there, you were AAA credit rating, meaning that you go to any bank and say, I have this shopping center, here's my tenant, is Albertsons or whatever grocery store. And they say, okay, here you go, how much do you need? But now, if you have a center where you have those kind of tenants, they're a little bit hesitant.
Really?
Because again, those tenants are focusing on online,
Mm.
and they're not doing as good as at the stores that at your traditional brick and mortar stores. So it really has changed. Commercial market has really changed.
What about warehouses? How do you feel about getting warehouses, getting somebody like Amazon in there? They're not going anywhere.
It seems to be that way. And so now I think the vacancy for warehouse is 2%, something like that.
Wow.
And they are still building. And the bigger you build, the higher the demand is. For example, there are some tenants that they only need 200,000 square feet and up.
Hmm.
So we have a lot of projects that are being built here. Being that we're here in between California and other states, we're like a hub here. So we're a good place for distributions. So we have a lot of these big box retailers using Las Vegas as a hub, and being close to I-15, they're building big warehouses and distribution centers to come from California, go to Utah, Arizona, and other states. And it seems to be it's going very strong. It is not slowing down, and I don't think it's going to slow down for the near future.
So I'm trying to get from the gap to real estate agent to now, big developer.
Mm-hmm.
What were the steps to get from there to here?
So I obviously started as an agent, and I would go and buy or not buy. I mean, I would go and try to find land for big home builders,
Mm-hmm.
and I would sell it to them and make a commission and try to do a listing. So what happened was, sales could be a great business.
Yeah.
You could do really good 1 month, but the next month you don't know where the paycheck is coming.
Yeah.
So I started thinking to myself that I would rather do something that has more consistency, and I want to know where my next month, where my payment, my check is coming from.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me interested in development. Some of the properties that I was listing, trying to sell to other developers, I said to myself, wait a minute, how come I'm not doing this myself?
Yeah.
So finally, back in 1998 is where I did my first project. It was an office building here. Actually, it's nearby here. And I just liked it. And, construction is a difficult business. I'm a contractor, so I'm actually do the construction myself.
Okay.
In my office, but I just had a good feeling about it, and I enjoyed doing it.
Okay. I have 1,000 questions on that. First of all, how'd you get into being a contractor? Like, did you kind of pick up those skills, or did you kind of just see the business and, I can hire people out and work on my own projects?
So the first project that I did, I had a partner, and he was actually the contractor. So I learned from him, just following him, watching what he does. And then we had about 2 years later, we did another project, and I just got more involved as I went on with every project with the construction.
Okay.
And I think it was 2002, 2003, that's when I got my own license.
Nice.
And started just being the contractor myself.
Do you work on projects that aren't your project just as a contractor?
I have not yet.
Okay.
No, I really try to focus on my own projects. I have not done that, and I don't think that's something I would want to do. Between my projects I think I have enough on my plate where it keeps me busy and it keeps me going.
Yeah.
I don't really have the time to do other projects, and I feel that takes away from my own projects.
Yeah.
And so I try to stick with just doing my projects.
Okay. And for that first real estate development project, was it that you just saved up all this money and you put it into it? Did you get partners? Were you using your own funds? How'd you go about it?
Yeah. So, back then, we're talking about 96, 97, 98 time, land was cheap here in Las Vegas.
Okay.
So you could buy an acre of land in a prime area for $350,000. Now, that was a lot of money for a student. I was a college student at UNLV, but at the same time, it was very doable. So what I would do, yes, I would take the land and I would take it to people whom I knew in the business, and I would partner up with them.
Okay.
So I only had to come in for a fraction on a deal like that. I only had to come up with $75,000, $80,000, which again is a lot of money for a student. But I was doing good as a salesperson. I was making enough commission, so that was enough money as a down payment for me to get involved in those projects. Of course, I would take a minority share. I was like a 25% owner, but that's how I started. Today, that would be very difficult because today an acre of land goes for $1 million.
Almost impossible as a student.
Exactly. So
how old were you? Like 21?
In 1998, I was 22. Yeah.
Oh wow. I'm trying to paint the picture. So you're 22. You're at school. You also have a sales job in real estate. And you're just saving up everything and moving towards being a developer?
I was. I was making good commission as an agent, and it was really tempting buying a nice car when you're a student at UNLV, pulling up in a nice car. But no, I didn't. I saved the money. I put it in the deal. And that's just kind of, it kept going. I kept rolling on it. Okay. And of course, listen, the Vegas market has been great. Of course, we have had our downturns and crashes, but I was lucky. I was in a good market at the right time. I was in a market where everything was still affordable back then, 97, 98, and it was going up. So I was able to start and keep up with the market.
Okay.
So that definitely was a huge factor. I can't take all the credit for that.
Yeah. It seems like your timing was great. 97, 98. I know about 10 years down the line, the housing crisis happened. How did that affect you?
2008 was a really difficult time if you were in real estate. And, I lost half of my assets in 2008. Wow. And it was really difficult. And the most difficult part about it was that I never saw it coming. Being that I was inexperienced and still young, relatively young, I had no idea what was coming. Well, I think a lot of people didn't know, but I was just clueless.
Your first downturn. Before then, it's just like, this is easy. Just keep on going up.
Yeah, it's just before that, it was like, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. Why stop? And it just hit, and it just was a difficult time.
I bet. You said you lost half your assets. Could you put a number on that? About how much would you say you lost in 2008?
In 2008, I easily lost between the properties and the values that I dropped over 20 million.
Oh,
easy.
How does that affect you emotionally? Like, I know financially it's terrible, but emotionally, how do you deal with that? Especially from coming from like things have been going so well. I've worked my butt off. I've got to this point, and now it kind of just seems everything's falling apart.
It was falling apart, and it was just really difficult. You were so focused on what was going on, trying to keep up and save your properties, that you didn't have time to think otherwise. And of course you were hoping for the best, because when it started in 2008, some people were saying, "Oh, it's gonna get better in a couple of years," and so it just kept getting worse. So it was very stressful. But somehow,
things bounced back.
I was able to obviously keep half of my portfolio, and it was a battle. You had to fight for it. You go from the banks approaching you to give you money, giving away money. That's what they were doing back then. And you go from that to all of a sudden being this guy who got the money from the bank, and now you have to pay it back, and now you have no way of paying it back, and now the bank is asking for their money. So it was very difficult. It was shocking.
Being an economics guy, someone who has a degree, did you kind of see before, like, it's kind of a little too easy to get money? This can't last this much longer.
No, I had no idea. And I think the reason for that was my age and lack of experience. So in 2008, I was 32.
Okay.
And not ever having seen a bad market. No, I never thought that this is going to happen. And at the time, there were some people who were obviously older and had an experience who would say, be careful. But at the same time, there were people who were going as fast as I was.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who never recovered and never came back in this business.
Okay.
And they just disappeared. And prior to that, they were doing really well. And then when the market tanked, they just gave up real estate and just left town and never saw them again, never heard from them.
Wow.
So no, I had no idea what was. I remember in May of 2007, I was doing a refinance. It was a shopping center. It was like a $14 million refinance loan we had to do. And, it was pretty routine at the time. And I remember the loan officer was telling me, let's hurry up and close this loan. Things are getting bad. And I said to myself, what is this guy talking about? What's getting bad? What is that? So, of course, we went ahead and closed the loan. Everything went as planned. So 3 months later, August of that year, 2007, I had another refi for a different shopping center. And that was like a little bit bigger. It was about $18 million. And then that's when everything stopped. And I never forget, I got a call from the lender saying that we are canceling your loan. We're not funding the loan, and the loan is canceled. And everything just stopped. And that's when it hit me.
That's crazy. So in 2008, you were a couple years older than I am now. What would you say for someone who wants to get into real estate development? What's the first step? What's step one?
The first step is getting your license.
Okay.
Because that gives you a good start to get familiar with, real estate and the basic things that you need to know. So that's the first step.
Okay.
And then the second step is finding the right person to mentor and learn from, and you basically following their footsteps. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough; I had some people that I knew through my dad that I was able to learn from them, and just gotta keep at it and work hard. Real estate, it's a difficult business. I remember the first year that I started, I made zero money. Of course, it wasn't a big deal because I was still a student back then. I was still living at home. I didn't have a mortgage to worry about. So imagine if I had to do that now with a mortgage or a family, then things would have been different. So it takes patience, and you have to be persistent. But in the long run, real estate does pay off, and it is a good business.
Okay. And do you think if instead of starting when you did, you were starting now, it definitely would be more difficult, but do you think it would be bordering on like, maybe I should do something else? It seems a bit too
hard. Yeah, it would be if I had to start it now. Obviously, as we get older, we are more we're not as flexible, and we do things differently. So back then, I just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes doing it and not thinking about it is actually, it helps you.
Yeah.
Sometimes analyzing too much, it could work against you. So I definitely, if I had to start right now, it would be different.
Okay. Have you ever thought about doing something else besides real estate?
Never.
Wow.
Never. I actually don't even think of it as a job. And it has its challenges, but I just love it. And not once ever thought that I should be doing something else, or no, never.
That's awesome. So you found your passion and what you love to do.
I have. I'm lucky in that sense.
Definitely. So it seems like we're going into a recession right now. How do you think this will affect the real estate market moving forward in the next year or two?
I think we're definitely heading into a recession, or hopefully a correction.
Yeah.
Obviously, nobody knows and nobody can predict, but I definitely think we are due for a correction, especially with the housing in Las Vegas. The prices that I see these days it's even higher than
Amazing.
2008. I just read yesterday the median price for Las Vegas last month was $480,000. And that's not good, because while it may be good short term for some people, in the long run, it's not a good thing, because what attracts people to our city is affordability and cheap housing. And if we lose that advantage over other cities, then it's not good for our economy. But yeah, definitely we are heading towards a recession or a correction. As to how deep or how bad it's going to be, is anyone's guess, and it's hard to say. But it's definitely, we're due for one.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. So you've been in Las Vegas for quite some time now. How do you feel that what are the advantages of being an entrepreneur in Las Vegas versus California, New York, Miami, or anywhere else?
No regulations, or less regulations, I should say. Affordability. The fact that a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old college student has the opportunity to become a part owner in a project. These are the things that you don't see in places like LA or New York, because those markets have matured and it's so expensive and competitive there. So I hope we can stay to be affordable, and I hope we stop following California laws and regulations. I feel that recently, especially after COVID, we're kind of following their footsteps. All these red tapes, those do not help. One of the reasons we have so much demand here from developers and investors is because it's probably twice as hard, if not more, to build something in California than it is here, because of all the red tapes and regulations, all the fees you have to pay. And as long as we can keep it the way we have it right now, people will continue coming. But the minute we change and we turn into those states with those regulations, I think that will hurt our economy, and people will not come here as much, because that takes away the one competitive advantage that we have.
Is that kind of like the curse of growth, though? Like, we have the Raiders out here now. It's looking like we're going to get an NBA team. And with growing and becoming a more mature city, you run into things, especially with, it seems like everybody from California is kind of migrating into Las Vegas. You think that just comes with it. You get bigger and you kind of become California number 2.
Yes, it does. Obviously, when we have people coming from California, we have to take the good with the bad. So we take their money, they come here, they invest in our states, they buy properties. But I guess the downside would be they try to change our legislature to be more like California. So yeah, as like you said, as we grow, as we get more people, that changes. I'm still optimistic. I'm still thinking that we're far, far away from being like those states. And I hope we never get to that point. But it has changed.
Okay. And where do you want to take Platinum? I know you said you're doing more apartment building and getting into that side of development. Where do you see yourself building Platinum into?
I want to continue what I'm doing and continue doing retail projects, apartment projects. I try not to do more than 2 or 3 projects a year, because again, that's how you get in trouble when the market goes down. So I try to stay steady and not grow too fast, because when I did back in 2007 and 6 and hit the 2008, then really that's when you lose control of everything, and it works against you. So for me, it's not so much that I'm going to say I want to do 20 projects in the next 10, 2, 3 years. For me, I'm trying to keep it more steady and continue what I'm doing, obviously, but at a pace where if there's a downturn, like it seems like we're having now, or there's one coming up, I want to be able to manage and not get into trouble like I did in 2008.
Okay. That's one of the benefits of going through like a downturn. You're kind of like war tested, and you've seen this before. Not like the first time you experience it's like, what's going on? Now you know. Now you know how to go about it.
Correct. It used to be that I would take a project, run the pro forma, and I said, okay, it looks good and everything on paper. But I never thought about the downturn. I never, they always say, you take care of the downside, the upside will take care of itself. But one mistake I made back then was that I never thought about, well, what if this happens? What if rents go down? It was never an issue. So now every project that I review to start, it's the first thing I do is I look at the downside. I look at the numbers. Okay, if the rents are this much, let's say, I'm going to put my pro forma using 30% less, just in case. That's something I never did before. So that's one thing that, being cautious, it's what I'm doing now and being more careful.
Okay. And when you develop these projects, are you developing them to hold on to them, or do you usually like sell them to another?
Hold on to them.
Okay.
I have sold a couple of projects in the past, and I have regret doing so. So I have, real estate is always good long term. And if you don't borrow too much and your loan to value is less than 50%, just to use some numbers, it's always worth keeping. And, building something is such a, I don't want to say difficult, but it's somewhat a challenging process. It takes 2 or 3 years to go through it, like I mentioned, that you really say to yourself, you know what, I don't want to go through this again. Why would I sell this project? So I'll just hold on to it. And when you build something, there is an emotional aspect of it too, that you get attached to it. It's like your own baby. Yeah. So it becomes harder to sell it, where if you just buy something and then you can sell it down the line. But when you build it, it just becomes more personal and you become attached to it.
Yeah. Speaking of babies, do you have any children?
I do not.
Okay. So are you married right now?
No.
Did you find it challenging when you're, building this real estate development empire? Is it kind of challenging, kind of balancing relationships and your career?
It is, in a sense that, it's easy to get distracted and lose focus, especially if you work for yourself. So, it's very easy not to show up in the office 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning because you're able to go out and do things or travel. So it is hard. It takes a certain discipline to do that and still be able to manage both. Yeah. And it is hard.
Did you make a conscious effort to say, this is my goal, this comes before everything else, and everything else is kind of secondary? Or it's just you were, so kind of motivated to get to this place, this was your singular focus?
I had a goal. I would say this is where I want to get. I had a number in my head that I said I want to get to this point. But no, I don't have that anymore because now I feel like I'm older. So I feel like there should be a more balance in my life. So it's exciting to do projects. But I realized there are other aspects to life that I shouldn't miss out on. And I don't have the same mentality that I did 10 years ago, let's say.
Okay. Would you change anything if given the opportunity? Would you change? And
listen, if we get a chance to do something, we always do it differently. That's always the case. But those mistakes are what makes us who we are today. So because of that, if I could go back and change things, of course I would have. But if I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't be where I am today, and learn from it.
That's the thing. It might not be a mistake. You can make some changes, and then I was a lot more successful when I was focused. So you said you had a number in your head. What was that number?
$100 million.
Okay. Did you hit it?
I came halfway close, and then 2008 hit.
do you still have that number, or it's just like, it's...
No, I don't.
Okay.
I have no desire to get to that number. I wouldn't be able to get to that number probably because for two reasons. One, I don't have the desire. I don't want to work that hard anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And because I experienced what I experienced in 2008, I'm more conservative now. So when you're more conservative, it's harder to get to that point.
Yeah.
So no, I don't, and I really don't have the desire to get to that number.
Okay. How big is your team at Platinum with the real estate development arm and also doing the contract?
Very small. We're, I have my brother with me.
Mm-hmm.
And usually what I do is I mostly deal with subcontractors.
Okay.
So I don't have anyone, let's say, as a team. So if I need, for example, we have a management company who manages the shopping centers. Mm-hmm. So they're like a third party. So they're not my employees. They're not in my office, but they obviously manage the shopping centers every month and they get their fee.
Okay.
Or when it comes to construction, I don't have any people on my payroll. I just hire them as I go, as a subcontractor. So that's another reason I try to not get too big. Okay. Because again, getting too big comes with its downfall when things go south. So I kind of try to manage doing it this way.
I see. And I'm a marketing guy, so I have to ask some marketing questions. When you build a property, like building an apartment complex, how do you go about the marketing? Do you have an internal team in the apartment, or do you just kind of, put up a sign and people come?
You know how they say there are 3 rules in real estate: location, location, location.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a good location, whether it's apartments or retail, and if you're building there, all you need is $150 to put up a banner and say available.
Really?
Honest to God. And if your location is good, that's all you need. Of course, marketing helps. But when it comes to retail, people usually lease retail space by driving by, seeing signs. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a different when we're dealing with national tenants. Let's say, I have a center here with a Big 5 sporting good. Those kind of tenants, you have to approach them. I wouldn't call it marketing, but what I would call that is networking and knowing those people. So that part of it, yes, you need to have that networking / marketing. So you call up these agents who represent these tenants. Each tenant has their own broker, all the national tenants. Mm-hmm. So you're able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I have this location. Are you interested?
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to the location, because if it's a good location, most likely they would say yes. But that part of it, that requires networking and marketing. Because let's say if I called 7-Eleven to come to one of my centers, I'm not the only one calling them. There's probably 10 other developers. So that networking and marketing part
How do you go about standing out? Is it just location? They have the best location, so let's go there.
Location, absolutely. That's the number one thing. But
Okay.
also knowing you and having worked with you in the past, that's always,
Oh, yeah.
I have lost tenants to other developers,
Mhm.
and I felt that I had the better location, but I felt that they went there because they had a better relationship with the developer of that project. They had a history more than I had with them.
Okay.
So yeah, all of that comes into play.
And is it more difficult to find a big name tenant to fill a commercial building or to fill up an apartment building with residential people?
It's more difficult to fill up a retail center with a big name. Again, it's market driven. So if the market is good for now, like let's say right now, the apartment market is so strong, there's no problem filling them up. But when you have a site that you have to fill up with a good tenant or what we call a national tenant, yeah, that's more difficult. Approaching them, convincing them, and then they have a whole committee they have to go through, and it's a process. Sometimes it takes up to a year to sign a tenant.
Wow.
And that's after they approve your site, which could take some time.
So you have to build the site and it's vacant for a year before you get anybody in
It
there?
depends. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. So in cases of what we call big box tenants or anchor tenants, no, you negotiate all that before you build it, because obviously they're just too big and you have to kind of design your center around their layout. So that's something you do beforehand. And you actually don't start construction unless you have that tenant signed and ready to go.
Okay.
On a smaller centers, I would say anything less than 50,000 square feet, then you can build it and kind of have the mentality of if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And they will come if it's a good location, even the national tenants.
Okay.
So it goes both ways. But the bigger tenants, yeah, you have to plan it before and do everything. And it takes a long time.
Wow. And what would you say is a good occupancy rate when you're doing the apartment buildings?
I think 90, 95%.
Oh, that's a lot.
That's a lot, but it seems like we're hitting that right now. Again, I think since we're heading for a correction, I think that will change. It seems like we're building a lot of apartments. So at some point, something has to give in. And I think the vacancy will go up. And but, anything over 80%, as long as you hit 80%, you should be okay.
Okay.
That anything over 80%, you're good.
And how do you go about the design of your apartment buildings?
So with apartments, you obviously hire an architect to do the design. So one thing about apartments is that, you may build the most beautiful apartment and really spend a lot of money on your design and layout and your finishes. But that doesn't mean you get $1 more in rent. So that's really a fine balance.
And that's where I was kind of getting at. Nowadays when you're renting out, especially the luxury apartments, there's every amenity in there. Do you kind of look at that or just like, what do I need to put in here? Or do you go for, I want the most extravagant building?
One group of apartment builders in town, the Elysian Group, they really have changed the market. They have like a whole networking between their apartments. They have like parties. They have events.
Always throwing events.
I visited one of their sites in Boca Park, and they have all these yoga rooms.
All the amenities.
All the amenities. These are something never seen in Las Vegas, and they're doing really good with that. And obviously, they charge for it in the rent, and people are paying for it. So it seems like it's working for them. But again, you go down the street, you may have just a basic apartment and with not as much amenities as they have. And you're probably getting close to the rent that they're getting. So it's really hard. But those guys have really changed the market, the apartment market in Las Vegas. to a point where they're spending more money. Their clubhouses are beautiful and it's so upgraded. Where before it was just a simple clubhouse, very basic. So we see both products.
Do you like the rest of the market? You said people weren't really doing that before them. Do you kind of have to compete with them? Like, okay, they're doing this, so I need to do this.
One thing I've learned about Las Vegas is that luxury in the long run could be dangerous, because when the market goes down, it's all about affordability. I think Las Vegas is more of a working town for people, and I try to stay away from luxury. I have been burnt on it before, building custom homes, and I've stayed away from it. But look, these guys have done it, and they've been doing it for the past 8-9 years, and they're doing a very good job.
Is that like I work in the healthcare space, dentistry, and what we're seeing in dentistry is we have a lot of like private equity, Wall Street guys coming along and kind of bundling a lot of different practices and then forming these super groups. Is that kind of happening in real estate where private equity is getting involved and like, yeah, no budget. Let's build the most luxurious places we can build.
Exactly. But the only difference is they don't build, they buy. So you have those hedge funds, you have those investors, same thing you have with a dental group. What they do is they come and buy the finished product. They buy apartments because they don't want to go through the hassle of building it, because that's a whole different thing. So they have all the money they collect from their investors, and they come and buy big apartment complexes. And that is one of the reasons why rents have gone up so much in Las Vegas, because people are building it and those guys are buying it, and it's so competitive for them. There is so much demand for apartments that they just keep topping themselves and paying more per door for each apartment. So it becomes more profitable for guys like me, apartment guys. They say, okay, then let's just build more. But yeah, definitely there is that factor. And at some point that has to slow down, or something will have that needs a correction too, because I see some numbers from people who buy apartments and I look at what they pay and how much rent they collect. I'm like, they have no margin. If their occupancy drops from 90, 95 to 80%, there is nothing left for them. There's on such thin margin on these apartments. But yet they still continue to buy them and pay for it, and they pay top dollar for it.
Okay. Wow. So with doing this, with coming into the recession, and it's looking like a real 2008-ish, what would you say is the biggest takeaway for people that are like when you were 21, 22 and just kind of experiencing this? People who are kind of, they have their feet wet in real estate. What advice would you give to them to kind of, be careful in times like this?
Not borrowing too much. Debt is what gets you in trouble. We all know real estate long term, it's good. But real estate has its downsides. It's during those times that if you're able to survive, then you make it and you survive, and long-term values go up. So if you're able to survive those downturns, which it seems like we're hitting one, and survive it, you will be okay and you'll make money. The way you survive those downturns is not having too much debt. So since 2008, I made a rule for myself. I don't do a project where I'm have more than 50% leverage from the value to the loan that I have. So if it's more than that, I don't do it. So if I have to do a project that I have to borrow more than 50% of the total value, I'm not going to do it. So debt is really the key for being able to survive. Because, one thing about capitalism is, when money is available, it's available. And it's so easy and it's so tempting not to get it. And you're like, most people who borrow money, they don't really think about how they're going to pay it back. And I learned this the hard way myself. It was always about let's borrow more, but we never thought about how we're going to pay this back. That was never, an issue. So I think debt is really, if you're able to control your debt and not have too much leverage, yeah, the market goes down, but long run, it bounces back up and it keeps appreciating. Las Vegas is a great market. I think Las Vegas will continue doing good. We are going to have our challenges, but we still have so much growth here. We still have so much land here, so much opportunity here. And we're still relatively smaller compared to other big cities. So there's just so much potential for Las Vegas that long run, if you're able to manage your debt and stay in the game, that you will succeed in the long run.
Okay. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I feel like that's the perfect way to wrap this up. Thank you for joining me on the pod, Ali.
Thank you for having me.